right now. So, we did the land acknowledgement. We've done a smudge. I want to acknowledge I use she and her pronouns. We want to be LGBTQ2 plus inclusive. So as you introduce yourself, if you can remember to acknowledge your pronouns, that would be wonderful. We want to respect everybody's feelings. This one's for me. No swearing or abusive language. I find that when I get ramped up, I start swearing, but that actually is violent language, and I don't like to start going down that road. So there is the rule of no swearing or abusive language, but it's more for me. No cross talking. If we were in a circle, normally you would have like a talking stone, and whoever holds the stone or the talking stick is the person who speaks. So I ask that we respect that in this setting now on a Zoom, and whoever is speaking, allow them to speak without interruption. Stay off the phone. Good call, Michelle. Turn off your phone. Okay, my phone is off, so unfortunately, if anybody is late, they're too late. Stay off phone, stay on topic. Crying with tissues. Oh yeah, I guess we're not there for that. So another rule that we have here, because this is a really sensitive topic about Indigenous issues, we actually let Indigenous speak first. So if you identify as Indigenous, we're going to do a round to kind of introduce ourselves to each other. And if you identify as Indigenous, when we do our next round, you will be allowed to speak first. And the reason why we do that is because non-Indigenous have always spoken for us, and that's no longer acceptable. And in a time of reconciliation, it's time for Indigenous to tell their stories. And nobody's story is wrong, but I think it's really important that as Indigenous tell their stories, that they feel comfortable knowing that they can take that space, because we've been told we're not allowed to for far too long. So we give space for Indigenous first. If we were doing an LGBTQ2 plus topic, I would definitely allow them to speak first. As a straight cis, I don't want to take space over an experience that I may not understand. So just to understand the boundaries and the rules, that we recognize privilege here, and that we recognize that there's a settler colonial displacement. I recognize genocide. I don't know if anybody here would argue that with me. I hope not. We've never really talked about that before, but the whole purpose of this conversation is to talk about reconciliation. We can't do that without truth. So that's kind of where we're at. So my name is Red Thunder Woman. My English name is Michelle Robinson. I'm Satu Dene. My family, I was born here in Calgary, but my family is up in Treaty 11, actually, the hair people. So we would always show up in rabbit skin. So they called us the hair people, the Satu Dene. And that's where my people are from. My grandmother and my auntie and 2 uncles survived Indian residential school. All of my other aunties, uncles, and my mom were raised in Catholic school. And yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So I'll talk a little less at this point, and I will invite Rosemary, and then Rosemary, you can invite the next speaker.
Okay, my name is Rosemary. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm a white settler of English, Irish, French, and German ancestry who settled mainly in the northeastern US, also parts of Canada, but I now live here on Treaty 7 land. And where I was born was on the traditional lands of the Onondaga Nation. Yeah, so I've been coming to the book club for a while, and there is so much to keep learning that I just have to keep coming. And Michelle, I can't really see people very well, so I can't.
Sure. Yep, that's fine.
I can't see their names, and I'm having trouble recognizing people.
That's okay, Rosemary. Thank you so much. Donna, how about you introduce yourself?
Okay, so I'm new to the group, and what I'm finding is I'm looking into my family history, and we are from Manitoba. And I know that members of my immediate family, so my family of origin, have actually been looking into the Métis Federation of Manitoba and our family history. So I'm here to learn as much as I can about Canada and the Indigenous people and take it from there, see how far I can go with that. So I need a lot of education in this area.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Donna, for that introduction. Kathy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Kathy. This is my first meeting. I'm Métis. I'm originally from Manitoba. I identify as she, her. This is a big area of interest of mine because I have lived experience. I was born into this. This is a lifelong journey for me. My mother attended residential day school. So my job in this lifetime is to learn and to teach others the truth of what's happened. And that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Jeremy, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. Hi, I'm Jeremy. I identify as, you can use he, him pronouns for me. I was born here in Calgary, Mohkinstsis, Treaty 7 territory. Last month, I shared with you a little bit of my family history, where I said my grandfather, just before passing away, had received his Eastern Métis card. So after that week, I kind of dug more into that, and I've come to appreciate that unfortunately, I think, you know, what he was engaged in was sort of race shifting, I guess is one way I've heard it described. And I was reading this book here, which talks about that it being a major problem in French Canadian society in the last decade or two. So based on, you know, scientific genetic tests or whatever, I have about 2% Indigenous North American ancestry, as they call it, which would be 5 or 6 generations in the past, one ancestor. So I've always identified as a white colonizer, and I think that that's the most accurate way I should describe myself. And yeah, here to learn from everyone and share.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. Crystal.
Hello, so I'm Crystal. My pronouns are she, her, or they, them. I am descended from settler colonizers on one side of my family from the 13 colonies from England, and the other side is from Romania, which as I learn more about Romania, Romanians were colonized repeatedly by invaders, so that's kind of interesting history that I'm getting into. I also grew up living outside of Canada for my formative years, as my father worked for the federal government, and so we moved around representing Canada in the very kind of superficial, symbolic way that Canada likes to be represented around the world. And then I came to live in Canada when I was 16, so I have that experience. This book club, to me, I was just thinking of it, I feel like this book club keeps me so grounded in reality that when I go out in the world, because everything is so whitewashed, right? And then I come here and it just grounds me again, and I know what is right and what is true, and I can keep moving forward in what I see my place is to do making reparations for damage. And part of that is I have to know what the truth is so that I can share that with other people, and especially other white people. So thank you. I always appreciate Michelle's work so much.
Honor. Thank you, Crystal. Kat, would you like to, speaking of work, Kat has some work to talk about too.
Hello, I am Kat. I use the she, her, or they, them pronouns. I am a settler, a white settler of British and German descent. I'm an artist who also runs another book club in conjunction with Michelle. She's my hero. And it's called Settlers Book Club. And along the lines of what Crystal said, it's more about learning the truth and sharing the truth and educating others, mostly white people, about what is really going on in Canada. And yes, I have been part of this book club gratefully for a couple of years now, maybe just one, and but I've been on the road to truth, real truth, for quite a while now.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome to have some folks here. I think Rosemary and Heather, I think you've been here the whole time. So anyway, Roberta, would you like to go ahead?
Hi, I'm Roberta. I identify as settler of Welsh, French Canadian heritage. I last meeting said that my uncles told me that my grandmother was Métis of, it would be French Canadian, but I know nothing about it. I've been following the Michelle Latimer case and the Trickster movies, and yeah, very, very hesitant. But I did call Darcy McCrae, talk to him, and definitely not Métis of the Métis Federation by the way my family moved. So I'm still just starting that search, that research, to figure out what my family actually, what my heritage really is. So lots of secrecy. Yeah, so, but yeah, identify as settler, and yeah, lots to learn, here to learn.
That's great. Thank you, Roberta. Heather Walker, would you like to chime on in?
Okay, can you hear me very well? Mm-hmm. I'm gonna sit comfortable. It's Solstice, and anyway, it's Solstice. So my name's Heather Walker. I'm in Calgary here. Solstice territory, excuse me, I'm practicing the pronunciation. Treaty 7. I am settler, 7 generations here, United States, Manitoba, Ohio, Kingston, Ontario, originating on both sides of the family in England, Britain, Ireland, somewhere, different places. They're like 100%, well, 90%, according to Jean Rosenthal, which is negated in the next book. So that was all good. So I am here to honor my settler journey in rebuilding relationships and recognizing that on many levels there is no reconciliation. We're just trying to conciliate. There was no relationship in the first place to rebuild, so we're working on it. So it's a work in progress.
Thanks, Heather. And Sarah, come on in.
Hey, how are you? Good to see everybody. I'm Sarah. I'm American, now Canadian, straight up settler through and through. If you dig back as far as you want, you won't find anything but European. And we moved to Alberta in Treaty 7 territory, Calgary, Mohkinstsis, in 2012, and just like my eyes exploded wide open with all the things that I was seeing and didn't even know, honestly, to be honest, were still existing in the world. In the US, it's very different. At least the regions I come from in the East. I think it's different out West. But in the East, it's a different world. And so I feel super thankful that I moved up here and that my ears were able to hear what they were hearing and my eyes were able to see what they were seeing. And then I had the great good fortune to meet Michelle, and that has become a huge part of my education. The books we read here, and just talking and working alongside Michelle in other activism. So that's my story.
I'm really honored that you are always so kind to me. You know, I think that there's a lot of folks out there that want to learn, but they just don't know where. And, you know, I'm a big believer that we all have our favorite mediums, and some of us are bookworms. So I'm really grateful that we all could kind of come together. My husband kind of forced me to start the podcast because to me, like, why would I do something like that? But he was very clear that that's like another medium for some people to learn. So that's why we got that started and going. And the hope is that this conversation will be uploaded and put onto the podcast as well, so others who are listening can hear our conversation if they want to. I mean, that might be the podcast they skip, I don't know. But on the flip side, maybe if somebody's reading this book, then that will be the one that they come to. Kathy, I know you just turned off your video, and I was wondering if you wouldn't mind, we'll take a quick picture together if you're good for that.
Oh, hang on.
Sure. We'll hang. And in the meantime, for those who are listening in, whether it's through podcast or whichever, the book that we are doing is All Our Relations, Finding the Path Forward by Tanya Talaga. And she's the author of 7 Fallen Feathers, the one that we had done previously in a previous book club. So, okay, we're going to smile. I'll count us down, and then I'll take a screenshot if you're all ready. So, in 3, 2. All right, I'm sure. Let's hope it's a good one. All right, thanks, folks. Yeah, and so when we upload this onto video, hopefully that'll be the picture that we use to go from there. So that's the hope anyway. Yeah, looks like it's not a blurry picture, so that's good. Okay, so I thought I would try something fun and try to do a screen share here for a video that we have. Now you can all see this. So let's see, all right, I'm gonna unplug, but I'm kind of watching. So give me the thumbs up if everything's okay once I hit play for audio. All Our Relations by Tanya Talaga is a book documenting the suicide crisis among Indigenous communities in Canada. Okay, maybe everybody else mute. Australia, South America, just looking at it unflinchingly, so that it's something that we can sit with, meditate on, and take it very seriously. Amplifies things. As a reader, I felt like I was benefiting from all of the years of thinking that Tanya Talaga has put into fiction. All the research is there. This book, the statistics are all there. But never, not once, does she remove her own heart. Approach to uncovering the story.
She just has one of those voices that is so authoritative. To read this book is to have your eyes opened.
Ed tells me that some people have suffered so much they disappear into the bush and never come back.
This act is symbolic of taking one's life. It disrupts the rhythm of life, because everyone born on Turtle Island has their path set for them, he says, and the choice to end your life is not yours to make. It is the Creator's.
Okay. So I hope everybody heard that. But yeah, I wanted to play that to kind of set the tone of what it is that we're reading. And so if you've read All Our Relations, I'd love to first, let's start with a circle asking your thoughts and opinions of the book that you had read. And because Kathy, you identified as Métis, I invite you to share first. I can't quite hear you yet, Kathy. You're still on mute. Sorry, I made everybody mute. Now you.
Okay. The book I found very hard to listen to read, because there's so much truth in it, and it was painful to read it. So I did it in small doses. There was things in the book a lot I had known, and had new learnings. You know, at times I felt very angry reading it. I felt very hopeless. But I still feel compelled to learn more, because this is the way we're gonna make change, is by learning and educating other people. So just really happy to be here and curious to hear what others think.
Sure, I'll invite myself as a native. Thank you for sharing, Kathy. Yeah, I think it's really important to re-emphasize that point of how painful a lot of these books are for Indigenous people. Just so you know, there's been many books that we've done that I've been unable to finish because they're too painful. And, you know, that is common in this book as well. Both this one and Seven Fallen Feathers, both books are so painful that I don't know how anyone can read them without crying. But I think there's a deeper pain for that intergenerational trauma wound being exposed as Indigenous people, and knowing the truth of the words that are being spoken. There was a few things so first and foremost, my book was supposed to come through Amazon, and then they last minute canceled it. So then I had to go to Pages and get a copy there, unfortunately. So I didn't get as far into the book as I wanted to. And on top of it, and it was already kind of mentioned, the Michelle Latimer thing, like another stupid wound ripped wide open, and us trying to have conversations. Like my professional life, I work for an arts group, and it's a common issue in our conversations. And yeah, they're hard conversations. The emotional racial battle fatigue Indigenous people face with every new controversy, with every new book, every new page of these books. Like they're hard wounds to open up. But you know, as I walk down my red road, I think it's important. And it's important to understand what the next generation's going through as well. So that's why I do it. But I wanted to emphasize this because I think everyone on this call is what I would consider a treaty partner, somebody who's trying really hard to be a better treaty partner. And just because every level of government has failed miserably at being treaty partners, and worse, perpetuated genocide, put those you know policies over here and look at the people and the citizens who think they're electing people in good faith with the intention of creating an equal relationship, and yet here we are. So as settlers, obviously, and for those who don't know, my dad is actually a son of the Mayflower, so I'm a daughter of the Mayflower and the American Revolution through his lineage. But my mom is Dene, so I'm considered, you know, whatever, half by some people, but that's not how our people work, actually. So anyway, we'll get further into that, but I wanted to bring up something that was really emphasized into treaty on page 61. In exchange for the huge swath of land rich in natural resources such as gold, lumber, hydroelectric power from the river systems, the signatories of Treaty 9 were to receive $4 a year, $1 less than the Treaty 3 Indians. And the commissioner said that they would work together with the First Nations to find them a suitable place for their reserves. The Indians understood that this would be territory that they could use on their own away from the other white men, but that they were free to hunt and fish and roam the land as always. When it was explained to them that they could hunt and fish as of old, and they were not restricted as a territory, the reserve merely meant a home for them where no white man could interfere or trespass upon, that the land was theirs forever. And they gladly accepted that situation. Martin wrote in a recently discovered diary. But if you were to read the fine print of Treaty 9, it says something quite different. economic progress, business, and settlement would take precedence over any Indigenous hunting, fishing, or land rights. The state's objective was simple: to get the First Nations to cede, release, surrender, and yield their land to the Crown. And I just wanted to re-emphasize that because I think it's something that we always talk about. Many of us on this call are on the front lines of the Wet'suwet'en, of any other extraction issues. And it's just so important to remind everybody that the treaties were signed under false pretenses, that whatever, you know, interpretation that was done was a lie. And, you know, we have these legal documents and here we are not honoring them. So I think as citizens, as neighbors, we want to be kind to each other. And that's why I want to re-emphasize how much I appreciate all of you, you know, committing tonight, committing your time, coming back to this club on a regular basis, because the people here are the seeds to kind of plant out to other people to get them to understand the gravity of what being a treaty partner means. And then because it was brought up about the Michelle Latimer thing, I've really thought the entire first part of this book, We Were Always Here, and that there are 4 questions that every Indigenous person, and well, I would argue everyone, needs to ask themselves. And the biggest one being, you know, what is your name, where are you from, and where do you belong? And that one, where do you belong, still hurts me because it's hard as a you know, person in Calgary, in Abbeydale, where Colton Croce went missing and was murdered, where the police didn't care, where they treated us poorly, where I talk about missing and murdered Indigenous women issues to a very deaf crowd, not here, but I mean society in general. And you know, it's really hard to feel like you're a part of a community. When I ran municipally and provincially, it was that idea that, yeah, we can have an inclusive community, but the problem is that if you don't have that anti-racism and Indigenous education framework, how can you be an inclusive community? So these are really fundamental things that I ran on because I want my daughter to feel included and part of a community, part of this community, and you know, part of Calgary, part of Alberta, and having her neighbors feel like they're her neighbors, not, you know, an us versus them. For those who don't know, I shared it on social media. There's an awful letter that came straight out of Lethbridge. And here was a Native mom raising her kids in a suburb of Lethbridge, and she received an awful letter from one of her neighbors. Basically, it just racist tirade, really, is what it is. And even for myself, when I was door knocking, I came across neighbors across the street that said most horrendous things to my face because they could, because I was door knocking. And you know, this is the reality that Indigenous people face. So how do we talk about belonging in a community that so badly wants to push us on reserves, keep us away from them? They want to be able to poison us and not, you know, be able to be responsible for water issues or for the elimination of the animals that come with the land. Like there's just an absolute, you know, absolving of themselves of responsibility. And then the idea that, you know, there's so many urbans that are in the urban setting, and then to not properly include us. Like that sense of belonging is a very hard thing for me to unpack. Now let's add Michelle Latimer, because I know everybody's talking about it right now, and it's a hard conversation. And for those who follow me on social media, you'll see some of the articles that I've been sharing. And the most important one, because here we are on Blackfoot territory, I think the most important one that there is actually from a Blackfoot filmmaker. Her last name is Tail Feathers, and she talks about the Michelle Latimer issue and how harmful and hurtful it was. She herself being hurt by Michelle Latimer and crying at Standing Rock about the issue on the phone about, you know, a potential project that she felt that she just couldn't be a part of because of unrealistic expectations. by Michelle Latimer. So here's somebody who's, you know, claimed to be Native and won all of these awards, taken money, claimed to support Indigenous people, and yet when Indigenous people say, you know, I'm not feeling supported, you know, not getting the support that they need, you have to understand how this opens up wounds. Even when I heard Donna speak, I was thinking, here's a displaced person because of government policy trying to reclaim who they are, where they come from, and if they belong, and being rejected because of people like Michelle Latimer taking that space and then opening these wounds. People who are like myself who know they're Indigenous, like I'm one of the more privileged Indigenous people. I know exactly where my family is. I know exactly where my land is. I know exactly my people. Yet it's been a hard, long struggle for me, and I suffer from what's called imposter syndrome, just as many Indigenous do, because, you know, once you're displaced from your language, your culture, your land, it's really hard to feel like it's okay to talk about those things. And I'm sad to say, whether it's here or whether it's on my podcast, I don't speak for all Indigenous people, and I never claim to, because there is nuance, just as you could never get all of the mayors across Canada to have one single spokesperson. That is a responsibility so many Indigenous people face. So to have someone like Michelle Latimer, you know, really take that space away from people who are actually Indigenous, it's an awful feeling. And I heard Jeremy speak about how, you know, he had family identifying as Métis when it was long ago. These are hard conversations because, like, for my husband, his great grandmother went to Indian boarding school or Indian residential school, it's the same thing. And as a result of the trauma, his grandma and his, you know, great uncle were not educated at all. The family was able to somehow keep them out of the school system, and they're completely illiterate. They were farmhands, and you know, then my husband's mother never identified Indigenous in any way, shape, or form, and will never. And so my husband has, you know, the very close relation, yet very scared to even identify, and yet the trauma is so clear in his family in so many aspects. He's even lost one of his aunts already, who was a former sex worker. You know, it's very clear that intergenerational trauma is there and present, but, you know, our own Indigenous community has attacked him relentlessly to the point that he's just disconnected. And honestly, it will just be a, you know, family conversation, because he's not like me. I'm out in public and telling people what I think of them, and, you know, telling a cop with a finger in their face what I think of them. But my husband's not that person. He's a very quiet, reserved man. And, you know, and I'm sure that's what makes us stronger, actually, the fact that he's a lot more reserved than I am. And so anyway, you know, this is a really hard conversation. And as usual, someone like Michelle Latimer rips open these wounds, just like Joseph Boyden did. And today, what am I doing? I'm telling young Métis that are like, I don't know if I should be taking space or grant money, you know, questioning their identity, questioning who they are, thanks to conquer, divide policies that have brought us to this moment where even folks who are actually Indigenous are uncomfortable taking that space. And I mean, I'm the pot calling the kettle black in this case. Settler Saturday is something that's on Twitter. It's something that happens every Saturday, and they encourage people to, you know, put their links and such in there to get money. And I have never felt comfortable ever putting Native Calgarian in there. I got a beautiful email from Kat to encourage an Ottawa company, a former guest that was on our book club, the youth one for 66, called Action 66. So obviously I really encourage that, but I would never have the courage to be able to say, oh, and you can donate to me, a Dene woman. I'm not that person. I don't have that, but I would be the first to say, you know, Bear Clan Calgary, Autan, USAY, organizations I would encourage to donate before me in a second. Have no problem doing that. So, you know, these are really hard conversations, and someone like Michelle Latimer's really hurt a lot of people. And I think we should really bring and center Eden Robinson's voice in this conversation. She is the author of the Trickster books. We've read some of the books here, even, and she's been very hurt by it. There was Paul Cisaquasis, another wonderful photographer. He put together a book on his photos. Anyway, he was speaking to Eden Robinson and had posted that she is feeling very awful, and that she wants to even donate some money of the project to you know, different Indigenous led projects. And I was really saddened by that, because it wasn't her responsibility to make up for the fact that Michelle Latimer lied to her. And so anyway, I think that's one of the more important voices to center this around, because there were a lot of Indigenous people that believed Michelle Latimer and worked with her because they believed her and believed in her as an Indigenous woman, but she wasn't an Indigenous woman, so they lied. And then I read, there's an Inuk filmmaker that I really love her work, and she had said that she was also hurt by Michelle Latimer because she tried to reach out prior to it going public. Apparently a lot of people knew this was going to go public, and that's really awful. So, and I think of Joshua Whitehead trying to call in Gwen Benaway the same way. She identified as a Métis, Two-Spirit, and is trans. And Joshua Whitehead wrote a beautiful letter to not attack her trans identity in any way, you know, use proper pronouns of she, and it was a beautiful call in. Anyway, they had tried for months prior to the call out to call her in privately as well, and to no avail. So, you know, these are hard conversations. When people ask where you're from, where you belong, it's important to know how to answer that. And obviously both Gwen Benaway and Michelle Latimer couldn't, as Joseph Boyden couldn't. And that's why I kind of, you know, gave a finger to the Alberta Teachers Association for bringing in Joseph Boyden, even though they knew he was a fake Indian, and they still brought him in. So there's a lot to unpack here because of this book, All Our Relations. It hurts. And of course, there's always some new trauma that causes us to be distracted and have our pain reopened. So that's what I have to say so far. I'll pass it on to Donna. Would you like to speak next? Have you read the book, and what are your thoughts on the book?
You know, I haven't read the whole book. I'm on part 3 of the book. And for me, it's been a total eye-opening experience as far as Indigenous people all over the world experiencing what the Indigenous people in Canada have been experiencing. And even up to 2007 and everything that's happening in Brazil. Yeah, it was hard to read. It was really hard to read. And like the things happening in Australia and New Zealand, yeah, it was just eye-opening. And it's really important to look at this and how people are treating humanity, actually, Indigenous, you know, people, and the struggles that they've had for hundreds of years, and they're still having. So I found it heartbreaking.
Yeah, I don't know where you're calling us from, Donna, but I can tell you that here in Calgary, we have many of the energy companies that are actually perpetuating that abuse globally. They come here, from here, Calgary, and everybody's A-okay with it. That's why On Drip is so important. So yeah, great thoughts and reflections. I appreciate that. Rosemary, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm only as far as partway through chapter 4. And like Donna, I really appreciated the overall context where she starts by talking about suicide, right, among young people. And she talks about it as a modern phenomenon connected to colonization, connected to genocide, and then that global picture that she paints of that phenomena of colonization, and, you know, centers it so much around, you know, the rupture from the land. You know, she talks about the four things: the fur traders, the missionaries, the Indian Act, and residential schools. And they all played a role in not only removing people's connection to the land, but from spirituality, from the communities, a sense of belonging. And then when she, in part 3, when she moves it into that discussion of healthcare, that was, I'm struggling to search for a word. I really had no idea of the depth of the issues within the healthcare system. And I keep thinking, if I had read this before, you know, Joyce Ashkelon had experienced what she did in the hospital in Quebec, why I didn't hear Tanya on the radio talking about any of this. I mean, she should have been interviewed on the basis of that chapter alone to you know, it's not just that there are 2 or 3, well, there are these racist hospital workers, right, who treated Joyce the way they did, but it's so embedded in that healthcare system. And, you know, the discussion of the separate Indian hospitals, and I think we've touched on that one before. Yeah, I was really moved by that chapter, and I'm very disheartened in the sense that, I mean, over and over again, Indigenous peoples have talked about what they see as solutions to so many of these issues in terms of indigenization of healthcare, of education, of, you know, the nation-to-nation relationship. And we as settler society, we just don't move on it. Nothing changes. And I